In this demonstration, we're going to practice working with the Linux shell. We're going to talk about how to determine which shell you're using. We're going to talk about how to change shells, and then we're going to talk about how to access alternate console screens. Now, as you can see here, I've booted this system into Run Level 3. Remember, in Linux, Run Level 3 provides you with a full networked multi-user operating system, but it does not provide a graphical user interface by default. You can still run one, but it has to be done manually instead of automatically. By default, Run Level 3 boots you into a text-based environment that you see here. And this is actually used frequently on server systems. A lot of server administrators don't like wasting CPU cycles redrawing that graphical screen all the time or running a screensaver. So you'll find that a lot of Linux server admins don't even run the graphical user interface. They configure their systems to boot into Run Level 3, so all they have on screen is a simple text interface. That way, more system resources can be dedicated to the various services that that server is providing. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and log into our system. Down here at the login prompt, I enter the username of the user I want to authenticate to the system as. In this case, it'll be Tux, and I will enter Tux's password. And we are now in. Now, the first thing I want to show you is how to determine which shell your user account is going to launch by default. To do this, you can use the echo command. By default, all echo does is write whatever text you tell it on the screen. For example, if I said echo hello world, it would simply display hello world on the screen, as you see here. Well, echo can be used for a lot more than that. Echo can be used to display not just a text string on the screen as we did here, but it can also be used to display the value of environment variables. When you log into your Linux system, your user account has a set of environment variables configured for it to define your user's computing environment. And you can view the value of those environment variables using the echo command. In this case, we want to see what my default shell is. To do this, I enter echo again like we did before, but this time instead of providing it a text string to display on the screen, I'm going to tell it to display the value of an environment variable. To do this, I first enter a $sign and then the name of the environment variable I want to display. In this case, it'll be the shell environment variable. Now, the $sign that you see right here tells the echo command that what follows after the $sign is not literal text that needs to be displayed on the screen, but is instead a variable. And therefore, what echo needs to do is find out what the value of that variable is and display that on the screen instead of the text itself. Notice that we're not putting $shell in quotation marks. We're just entering $shell. If I press enter, the value of the shell environment variable is displayed on the screen. And you can see here that by default, my Tux user account will use the born again shell, bash, and the path to the executable for bash is displayed on the screen, /bin/bash. Now, are you stuck with using bash? No. There's lots of different things you could do. You could go in and configure your various shell configuration files to change your default shell to a different one. Or if you've already loaded the bash shell, as we've done here, you can switch shells at any time. For example, if I want to start using the sh shell, which the bash shell descends from, all I'd have to do is enter the command to load the sh shell at the command prompt, press enter, and I'm now using the sh shell instead of the bash shell. If I want to exit out of the sh shell and go back to the bash shell, all I have to do is enter exit. Now, there's one other thing I want to show you before we end, and that is the fact that Linux is a true multitasking operating system, meaning that we can have multiple shell sessions working at the same time. A lot of folks, when they come to the shell prompt on the Linux system, start having visions of the old days of DOS. Now, back in the old days of DOS, you had one command prompt, one command interpreter, and that was it. You ran a command on a DOS system and you ran just that one command. You couldn't run multiple programs simultaneously. Well, Linux is not like that at all. It is a true multi-user operating system. We could run multiple programs simultaneously from this shell prompt, which we'll talk about in a later demonstration, or we could run multiple shell sessions simultaneously on the system, each running their own programs. Now, if you're in Run Level 3, the way you switch to a different shell session is to hold down the Alt key and then press a function key. In this case, I'm going to press Alt F2. And notice when I do, a new shell session is opened up and I can log in again as my Tux user. and I'm logged in. And I could run a command here. For example, I'm going to run a program called top. Top is a process monitoring application. It just sits there and watches all the processes running on the system, how much memory they're using, how much of the CPU they're utilizing, who started the program, what's the priority of that process on the system, and so on. So I'll press enter here. And now top is running in this shell session, but I can press the Alt F1 key and go back to my original shell session, and you can see that top's not running here, it's running in a separate shell session. In this way, Linux is a true multitasking operating system, and it's also a true multi-user operating system because other users could connect to the system remotely over the network, open up their own shell sessions on the system, and run them all simultaneously. Let's go ahead and switch back to my second console screen. Let's go ahead and exit out of top by pressing Q, and I'll log out by pressing exit. And we'll go back to my first shell session by pressing F1, and let's go ahead and log out. And that's it for this demonstration. In this demonstration, we showed you some basics of working with the Linux shell. We talked about how to access the shell prompt. We talked about how to change which shell you're using, and we talked about how to access additional shell sessions.